Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Let me find out if you've had this experience. You are preparing to talk to a large group of people who you're nervous about, and you start to imagine yourself getting up in front of this group, and you start to feel insecure, a little bit self-conscious. What are you going to say? What if you say the wrong thing? What if people laugh at you or think you're stupid? Just put yourself in that scenario for a moment. Just imagine yourself getting ready to give a talk to your office in the consultation room, or maybe a big crowd giving a speech or a talk on stage, or even people you just have to address that you're nervous you're going to say the wrong thing. Just put yourself in that position for a moment and realize how much maybe fear, anxiety, restriction you feel viscerally in your body, in your heart, in your mind. What are you feeling in that moment?
Maybe your mind has gone blank and you can't remember what you were supposed to say at all. I think 100% of us, if we've ever been in front of a group of people, or even just one person that makes us feel this way, our mind goes blank and we have no ability to say what we planned or is natural to us or is authentic to us.
So today we're continuing our series from the book The Tools by Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels. Great book. Recommend you pick up a copy. In the last two episodes, we went over the first two tools in their book, and now we're on tool number 3. We're going to talk about that on today's show, how to deal with this idea of showing up somewhere, having to give your voice to something, and you feeling fear or a pullback from that experience. How do you deal with that in your life?
This tool is called inner authority, and the higher force that it pulls on is the force of self-expression. Effectively, the purpose of this tool or technique is to combat what I was mentioning before, you were mentioning before, Joel, the universal experience of insecurity, particularly the kind of insecurity that robs you of your ability to show up as yourself. It makes your mind go blank. You freeze. You don't have the capacity to at all communicate what you want to communicate. And unfortunately, it ends up going in a cycle, because when we show up that way, then other people get impressions of us, or we believe that we've given them impressions of us, and we get even more scared and afraid. We feel like, oh no, now because I showed up and I froze, now I look even worse. And the insecurities now, they pile up on each other. They compound each other. And you eventually get to a place where the insecurity robs you of your voice. It robs you of your capacity to engage with other people. It can be isolated events. It can be with just one person. One person has the capacity to just shut your mind down. It can be the inability to communicate with larger groups of people, like in this scenario that Joel was painting as a talk in front of a group. Maybe it's a group of people at your work. Whatever has made you feel inferior, whatever makes you feel like you are engaged with other people whose right it is to judge you, and it's your job or duty or responsibility to hand power over to their judgments, whenever creates that scenario for you is a scenario that requires inner authority to combat it.
In personality typology, I'm an ENFP. I use introverted feeling as my decision-making process. I love this idea of inner authority. It really resonates with me a lot. And I tend to see the world in that way. And I also think that it doesn't really matter your type. All of us can benefit from this idea of inner authority. Your own authentic voice, speaking your own authentic heart and mind into the world. I think it's something we all desire. We're all striving for this, to be ourselves, to be able to speak from our heart, from what's going on at our gut level, the inside of us that comes out authentically. That inner voice is so important for us to bring to the table, and I think this tool giving us access is really powerful.
Well, and what's nice is that the touch point of inner authority, or this particular tool, has its roots in Carl Jung and shadow work, which of course is the access or the etymology point of the personality typology systems that we are fond of, like Myers-Briggs. The challenge with insecurity is that we don't feel like we are facing the world with our best side. The thing we fear is that those whose right it is to judge us and whose responsibility it is when it's our responsibility to listen to them, the thing we fear they're judging isn't the best part of ourselves that we've put forward. We fear that they're seeing the worst parts of us. We fear that they're seeing our shadow, the part of us that we ourselves have marginalized and shoved to a corner, feel is the sort of the amalgamation of all the worst parts of who we are. And maybe it's a caricature of a past self, a part of ourselves that we felt were laughed at or were judged or believed weren't very good parts of who we are, that we spend a lifetime of putting layers and layers and layers of showmanship and smoke and mirrors and all of these different styles of war paint to face the world and go, look at how awesome I am. In those moments that we freeze, we fear that people are seeing right through us. They're seeing through all of these different strategies we've created in order to sort of fake our way through life. It's as if we have a schism inside of us. We have the front-facing social aspect of ourselves, and then we have the sort of real, hidden, you can't let anybody see this like real person on the inside. And when we freeze, our fear is that they're seeing right through that social face, right to that part of who we are, that shadow part that we just can't hide. We fear that we've exposed ourselves, or there's some sort of transparency that makes it so that we can't keep them from understanding our dark secret, that we're actually terrible people who are worthy not of love, but of judgment and censure. So the really nice thing about inner authority is that it goes into this Jungian concept of shadow work. And instead of continuing to put on more bells and whistles in order to impress people and do a dog and pony show, we actually need to go to that shadow part of who we are. And instead of continuing to push it away, we need to contend with it.
Every one of these tools we've talked about, including this one, is about releasing control. It's about releasing control not to the other, people outside yourself or circumstances. It's about releasing control to a higher force or a higher power, however you want to contextualize that for yourself. It's releasing yourself into, like in the last episode, we talked about agape love, principled love, this idea of outflow, active love. You're releasing the control or the transactional elements of love to something higher than that. In this, you're releasing that control of your image, all the ways you want to control how people perceive you. You're releasing control, and you're just saying what's authentic in your self-expressed way fully. So I think it's important to realize that there's the actual exercise we're going to talk about, void of context of the books. You're going to need the book maybe for more context, but we'll give you the exercise. But realize that each one of these exercises, these tools we talk about, is tapping into a higher force in your life. There are cues that indicate when inner authority is the right choice as a tool. Anytime you have performance anxiety, you're anticipating an event maybe you have to present at or go to. I mean, you're maybe not even on stage, just people you have to meet, or some type of experience of showing up as your authentic self, and you're anxious about that ahead of time, or you're actually in the event, whatever this experience is, and you need to reconnect with your inner authority. Those are two different cues they talk about in the book, the author's outline, as ways to focus in on when to use this tool of inner authority. So the actual tool of inner authority is this. Imagine you're standing in front of an audience of one or many. See an image of your shadow off to one side facing you. Ignore the audience completely and focus all of your attention on the shadow. Feel an unbreakable bond between the two of you. As a unit, you are fearless. Together, you and the shadow forcefully turn toward the audience and silently command them to listen. Feel the authority that comes when you and your shadow speak with one voice.
Now, obviously, if you're going to use this technique, you'll have already determined what your shadow looks like. And in the book, they make a recommendation to create almost a caricature of that shadow part of who you are. Is it a younger version of you that maybe was rejected or felt rejected? Is it a part of you that you think nobody will ever accept? Is it a part of you that you struggle to accept? I think my shadow would probably be something around a 12-year-old girl who was just starting puberty, who had asked her mom to cut her hair super duper short. And so spent the entire 7th grade answering the question of whether or not she was a girl or a boy. That would be mine. That was when acne came on the scene. That was when my body started changing. That was when I felt the least accepted. And it had to come on the heels of having been a really cute kid. So for most of my childhood under the age of puberty, under the age of 12, I was considered a really adorable little kid. And then all of a sudden, puberty changed everything for me. And I went from being somebody who was considered adorable to being somebody who was considered the exact opposite of adorable. And so that kid who was rude to other people out of self-preservation, I still remember things I said to others just were horrible because I was so insecure. So not only was I without a sense of voice or inner authority or understanding who I was also somebody who took it out on other people and was mean. I mean, this is probably pretty true to ENTP fashion, but I was cruel with my jokes. So it's a part of me that it's really hard for me to personally accept. It's also a part of me that continues to live on as the deepest insecurity and reason why I believe other people would never accept me because of how I look, how I show up, how I behave, and how much I had changed. As in, it felt like it went south so quickly. And so I felt a very visceral turn of evaluation from the outside world, or at least that was my experience. So knowing that part of who you are, the part that for me is, painfully awkward, mean and cruel, living in my own misery and not really understanding anything, also not understanding how anything works and just making it up as I go and hoping it's okay, saying the wrong thing in class, being laughed at. That's the part of me that's the shadow that I've had to integrate. And actually, I did quite a bit of work on that with a therapist many years ago. So I already know what my caricature looks like or that part of who I am looks like because I did work around it. But you may need to take some time to ask yourself, the part of you that freezes, what does that part inside of you look like? Or when you freeze because you think people are seeing that part, what is that part? What does it look like? And he gives, or the writers give a lot of different examples of what it can look like. Usually it comes from a younger version of us when we were still trying to figure out the rules of society and the rules of how we were going to show up. And it oftentimes goes back to moments where we froze when we were younger. But in order to do this technique or to follow this tool, you'll need to have that very clear in mind so that when you have a moment of the two of you embracing each other and then in unison turning to who you're looking at or whatever you're looking at as your audience, then in order to both be speaking and thinking mentally, listen up, right? Listen up, we're going to be talking now. You need to know what that part of you that you have deemed unacceptable is. You can't just know that it's there. You have to integrate it as part of who you are.
Remember that self-expression goes beyond just the things you say as well. The behaviors and actions you show up to the world with are also part of self-expression. You might be a performer, an athlete, someone that communicates or expresses through action. And so this technique or this tool can also be used to bolster that sense of security and self-expression, even if it's action-based, not just verbal or vocalizations or articulations. So I think that's really key also to remember. This can be used for either of those.
I think this is a place too where understanding your personality type is really helpful because we talk about when you understand your Myers-Briggs type and then you understand your cognitive function stack or the driver and particularly co-pilot and the car model, but really all of your basic your first four cognitive functions, you can find different ways to get into flow. What's nice about flow is it's, when you're in flow, you're in the zone, right? You're in a place where you're just behaving and acting and not really doing so with a sense of self-consciousness. When you have an idea of what your flow state is, you can tap into the part of you that speaks from a place of that only understands inner authority. When you're in flow, there there doesn't need to be any outer world approval. That's irrelevant. You're in a place that's 100% about you and your self-expression and the experience you're going through. So if you can remember what that feels like, you can take the souvenir of inner authority from those moments and bring it into those other situations to go, okay, this is actually what I'm going toward. I'm going towards a place where I trust myself. I can rest into my capacity to be 100% focused on my inner authority and not on outer world feedback. That's irrelevant right now. Right now, what I'm focused on is me and this part of me that maybe I've shoved to the side for, since time immemorial, both of us working in concert with each other to speak and express and come from a place that's 100% internal, to be able to communicate real things, not just do, again, the dog and pony show where you put on the bells and whistles and you're like, maybe everybody will like this. If the fear is that you can't hide that part, if the fear is that you're being transparent anyway, the fear is that they're going to see you no matter what juggling act you do, then just own it, right? It's a feature, not a bug. This is a part of who you are. And if they're going to see it anyway, then have all of you speaking to them. And then they'll be able to see all of it. They won't just be, your fear is that they're looking just at the evil monster inside or whatever. But the truth is that we're really complex and people are seeing what we show them. If we can show them not just that part that freezes up, but actually show them the holistic us and give them insights and windows into all of the parts of who we are that include bad stuff that we're not disowning, we're not pretending we don't have bad stuff, but we are able then to have the freedom to show our better part and go, the bad stuff inside of me, it's not precluding the good stuff. I'm able to also come with better parts of who I am, despite the fact that I'm imperfect. And then that makes you relatable. That makes you human. That makes you like everyone else. If you close in, if you create distance, if you're unrelatable, if the person can't see the good because you're also shielding the bad, now they can project ill intent on you. That's oftentimes when people are considered snobs or stuck up because they're not showing anything of themselves to the other person. If you are allowing them to see the good and the bad, well, now you have a relatability because they're another human too, and there's good and bad in them as well. And now you can connect on that very human level. So there's a lot of advantages to making peace with the shadow part of who you are. And in particular, there's nothing left to hide, so there's nothing to freeze around when you've been exposed. And I think what I really like about this tool of inner authority is there's multiple positive emergence that come from a system with inner authority as a node. The first one is it's hard to find yourself if you haven't found your voice. Most of us discover who we are through expression. We observe ourselves expressing, and we see how we engage in the outside world. This goes back to that whole concept of the objective and the subjective with the ethics of ambiguity, which I've mentioned multiple times, which I really like the concept of, which is that the subject is me and the object is everybody else. And there's a tension that happens between those two places. I can't expect everybody to come to me, but I also can't expect myself to go to everyone else. There's got to be a meeting in the middle. And when we express, that is our capacity, or that's our moment to be able to see how we're engaged with the objects outside of ourselves. We get to see ourselves in a different space, in a space that's very natural, right? Because no man is an island. We don't just exist all by ourselves. We exist as part of a dance with other human beings. So when we watch ourselves in that tension between those two places, that's where we find ourselves. That's where we really see who we are. And so part of the inner authority to express is also the inner authority to be, to simply show up as who we are. We often find our real selves, not hiding the parts that we think are objectionable to the outside world, but in expressing all of that. And then we discover who we really are because we're not hiding from ourselves and others. The second thing is that we find a way to create unity by being relatable. We find ways to connect with others, and we create unity without losing our individuality. We still get to keep ourselves because we're expressing, we're creating, we're putting ourselves out into the world. And then we're also creating that relatability that also promotes harmony. So we're able to have harmony with the outside world while still keeping who we are. We're not tap dancing to other people's fiddles. We're not trying to be what they want us to be in order to protect our image, and in that way, losing ourselves more and more to this image.
I admire rock stars, like people that get on stage and sing, like, really famous singers or performers, because I think they've really tapped into this idea of expressing. They may write and perform their own music, their own voice, their own expression of something, and they find their voice through that, their authenticity. They don't let anybody tell them how to be. Sometimes it's crazy stuff, their performance. And also that community idea, that tapping into a larger picture, they're able to create experiences for people to come together and have communal, moments with music. I think it's really interesting to see how, quote unquote rock star, now maybe they're not fully in their own experience, their own self-expressed voice. Maybe there's some performance to it. But let's assume that they're expressing fully. I love that kind of image that I see in my mind when I look at a rock star. And I kind of try to embody that a little bit in my life. Like, how can I show up almost like I'm a rock star in life? I don't care if anyone disagrees with me. I'm going to get up and I'm going to self-express in this way. Let the chips fall where they may. And hopefully, by expressing, you and I getting up and expressing on a podcast like this or anywhere else, we're giving an opportunity for a community of like minds to grow and for people to have a bigger experience than they could by themselves.
Right. I think that, in the case of a rock star, it might be that performance is their flow. And as soon as they get off stage, they no longer feel a sense of inner authority. And I think you can really sort of tell when somebody has found a way to embody this in all aspects of their life or only in something that they have natural talent in. Being able to do it in all aspects of life also makes you somebody who's inspirational because you're consistent with that voice. You're not only in flow in front of a group of people, but you're also able to embody this in other areas of your life. And it's not just, again, an image that you're trying to maintain. So there's an inspirational quality that comes from people who have figured out their inner authority. This is actually, in some ways, very introverted feeling work, which is probably why you like it as an ENFP, Joel.
Absolutely.
It's very much about tapping into who you are and the expression that comes from who you are. And another element of it, there's so many positive things that come from this tool. Another element which speaks to me as a sexual subtype in the Enneagram is that this is where we also unselfconsciously express need and vulnerability. When we're not trying to get people to think something about us, we are so much better at creating a way to ask, right? It's like a way to be vulnerable and show people that we don't have it all figured out and that we might need help from others, and also that we're able to provide help in reciprocity. So it increases intimacy and the ability to get out of the shell or knock down the shell and really show people who we really are is that way of, again, relating and creating relationship and forming not just connection, but true intimacy through that honest expression.
So this tool is called Inner Authority. It comes from the book, The Tools by Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels. Fantastic book. I recommend you get a copy. We're going to have a link in the show notes. And if you've been listening along, what's coming up for you? As we talk about this inner authority idea, this tool from this book, what's been your experience in your life? Have you maybe tested this in your own life? Is it something interesting to you? We want to hear your comments, your questions. I want to hear your story, quite frankly. Come over to personalityhacker.com. Directly below this show, leave your feedback and make your voice heard.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, it's incredibly helpful. I read them all. I love it. Go leave us a rating and review. A review as well, not just a rating, a review, so we can read what you have to say. We love it. Also, we have a book. It's called Personality Hacker, and you can get it at all major book retailers. If you leave a rating and review on Amazon or on Goodreads for a book, that is also quite helpful. And of course, we have been ad-free for 6 years. We do that by subsidizing the podcast with our programs. Personality Hacker, if you go to our catalog and our suite of programs, you might find a personal development program tailored for you. So if you want to invest in yourself and take this to the next level, go check it out.
My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.